إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليًّا ولي الله. محمد. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليًا حجة الله. اللهم صل على محمد. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين خالق السماوات والأرض إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين طه وياسين بالقاسم محمد. وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين، ورحمة الله على محبيهم ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتبارك في كتابه الحكيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. Respected sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullah. The day of Jummah, the day of Friday, is a day of ibadat, of worship, of getting closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's also a day that in the Salatul Jummah, the part of the khutbah, it is obligatory to remind the believers, to remind the believers to observe the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ittaqullah ittaqu rabbukum, and to be conscious and wary of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of our dealings and affairs in our lives. We find the Quran Majid guiding us on our obligations as believers who want to reach close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a sub-part of that discussion, we were talking about Risalatul Hukuk, the rights that Imam Zain al-Abidin had laid down in his treatise. And in his treatise, he has mentioned various obligations and rights of different aspects of an individual's life that he or she may have interaction with. Whether it's the creator, whether it's their own body, whether it's those around them, whether it's their deeds, All of these have got an impact and an aspect or some degree of guidance, you can call it that. So we had mentioned that last week we finished our discussion on the rights of the leader. And we had mentioned that today, inshallah, we will now begin the one who trains you, one who passes on knowledge to you, a teacher basically. And a teacher has got obviously rights that are on the student. And one of the things that the Imam goes into a little bit of depth on is the rights of the teacher is that you learn that you are getting knowledge from him or her, whatever the case may be. And a lot of times sometimes when we're talking about ilm, knowledge, we sometimes have a tendency in our minds just to limit that to a religious knowledge. Now, one of the things that Islam has taught us very uniquely, and that is that knowledge is all-encompassing. Anything that we learn, anything that we acquire, as far as ilm is concerned, as far as knowledge is concerned, has a way of getting us close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of the sciences, all of the knowledge can be considered as religious knowledges. Okay, so one of the things that is very an encompassing part in the teachings of Islam is the fact that it is anything that gets us closer to Allah. So if we are understanding condensation, we are getting closer to Allah. You know, you talk about the cloud formation, you talk about biological sciences, you talk about the plants and nature. All of those are pertaining to nature, pertaining to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which can get us closer to Allah. Even the human body, when a doctor is practicing, that also is getting him close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the Imam talks about knowledge, he's talking about the whole overall idea of knowledge, not just specifically what we would think of as religious knowledge. You know, we have a tendency to differentiate what is religious knowledge and what is perhaps we call it irreligious knowledge or non-religious knowledge. And this is where perhaps our own shortcomings are become evident. One of the things I was reading about was the French separation of church and state. And in France, one of the things, and I was reading an article just a couple of days ago, whereby they were saying that in the 1930s, when the French decided that they will have a law requiring, ordering the separation of church and state, they made a line drawn. They made a line that, well, this is a religion and this is not religion. And this ideology somehow went on to a number of other Western countries as well, even in the thinking. So a lot of times, for example, we've had, and right here in Canada, practicing Catholic members of parliament or government ministers who supported abortion, for example. You've had practicing Catholics who supported birth control, which for their religion is not permissible, as in the case of abortion. And so when they were interviewed, they were asked that, does this not conflict with your belief, with what you claim to be as part of your religion, as for your faith? They said, no, that is the church, this is the state. So my laws or my voting in the parliament, I'm a secular Canadian minister or cabinet member or member of parliament or what have you, or provincial parliament, and when I go to church, that's when I'm a religious person. So my religion is limited to the church, and my obligations as my job is the state. So this is where the knowledge that, and this is how it sort of has crept up into our minds, that they will say that when you think about, or when you talk to a student about how do you get thawab for learning, that student, that child, a Muslim, even a Jafari child, will tell you, oh, I'm getting thawab when I go to madrasa. Alhamdulillah, I see madrasa teachers and disciplinaries here, administrators here, may Allah reward you all, inshallah. But when you ask them that, what about school? Oh, no, why would I get thawab going to school? Why would I get, this is the question that is posed, why would I get thawab going to school? And so when when I'm teaching the students, and I tell them, I say, by the way, you do get thawab for learning math and history and geography. And you do get thawab for participating in physical education, phys ed. Then there's a certain degree of surprise. There's an awe there. I said, well, why? I said, your teacher is your teacher. It's not just your teacher who taught you Alif Ba or who taught you Usul ad-Din and Furu ad-Din, but your teacher is your teacher. And so there's an obligation, because I was just having one teacher tell me that, students in my class told me swear words and they told me this and they told me that. I said, well, I'm sure they would never do this in church. If the minister or the pastor or the priest says something they don't like, they won't start using foul language. Why? Because they're in church. God is there. Who says God is in school? Why would I have to worry about God when I'm in the educational institution? And so you can see where the mindset comes about. And you can see how Islam came to destroy that type of mindset. And says, no, any knowledge that is benefiting you, that gets you closer to Allah, whether it is about physical sciences, whether it is a metaphysical sciences, whether it is about the heavens, the earth, the oceans, or the mountains, they can all get you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the one who has taught you that is what we are discussing in this discussion, in our obligation to the rights of the teacher. And so the Imam has actually mentioned, and the Imam talks about, whoever has taught you, he has got an obligation on you. You have a certain degree of obligation to that person. And then our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, Imam then goes on to say, do you know what some of the rights of the teacher are? He says, somebody who teaches you, you should not speak in front of them unless you're asking a question. You should not raise your voice in front of them. You should, and there was one thing very interesting that the Imam says. He says, before you go to the lecture, so before you go to class, you should mentally prepare yourself. Now, this was an interesting thing, because when we're coming, whether it's just for a Thursday night lecture or whether we're coming for a class, we don't always, we have notes and we try and prepare ourselves to some degree. But what did the Imam say? He said, mentally we brace ourselves that we are going to learn. We may or may not know the subject. If we're in school, we know the subject. If we're coming to Shab Jummah, Laylatul Jummah, we may not know the subject. So we prepare ourselves mentally. This is one of the things that they taught us when you are looking at an Olympic medallion or even just an Olympic athlete. What do you find? You find that the athlete, the Olympian, they don't just pop up at the Olympics and they win a medal or bronze or gold or silver or whatever. It's not just like that. They've had to train for it. So 4 years are spent training, and then they go to participate and represent Canada or whichever other country. When you're going to the gym, and mashallah, I see there's been a phenomenal increase of those going to the gym, physical activities. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless you. There's reward for it. But when you go there, you don't just start the machines right away. You don't just start the cardio and the vascular. You don't just start everything right away. They do what is called, what do? They first say warm-ups. You warm up and then you start. With the treadmills, they also tell you that you warm up and then you build the slope and the speed and everything. And then before you stop, you don't just stop all of a sudden after you've been going for 4 or 5 miles an hour running, and then you've been going on a steep slope, and then all of a sudden you stop, you might collapse. They say slow down. So warm up on the one side and then slow down, and then you are there. So what they say, and I don't mean to make anybody hungry, but it's like a sandwich. You've got the bread on top, you've got the bread underneath, but the meat is inside. So that actual cardio activity and exercise, that's the meat. That's where you're supposed to, inshallah, lose the weight or get yourself fitter or get your heartbeat to whatever you want it to, or develop or build your muscles. But the warm up and the warm down or the slow down is the bread that, alhamdulillah, it's there. It gives you that extra taste. But for the exercise, it gives you that ability to absorb and to prepare yourself. Because you will cause damage if you don't do that. If you're going to go on an exertion point, you will cause damage to your body. The same way when you're coming to seek knowledge, you prepare yourself mentally. Because not that you will have damage the same way you've got physical damage, but you will have not the full preparation. One of the things that Islam tells us, and the hadith of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala it says that when you're coming for even salat, which is a wajib duty and obligation, don't come, and there's a verse of the Holy Quran to this effect as well, that don't come to the salat groggy, sleepy. Imagine there's a philosophy of the wudu as well. You do the wudu before salat. And when you've just woken up, you have to, of course, go do wudu, and then you can go for the salat. And they say, it's interesting, because I was trying to connect things, and I do this on a practical level. If somebody doesn't wake up, and I hope you don't do this with your children, but I've known our parents to do it. I don't think my parents ever did it. But if they don't wake up, you shake them, wake them up, it's time for school, it's time for school. What do? You get a little bit of cold water and Why? Why water? Well, you're going to tell me you can't put a hot cup of tea on there because that's good. You're going to get family and child services at your doorstep. But water awakens it, awakens them. The change, there's something in the content of water that is used to awaken somebody. And so Allah Ta'ala tells us to do wudu with water. And therefore, there is a certain degree of awakening. Imagine if, and I've seen this, believe me, and I've seen this. Alhamdulillah, Jafaris don't do this. We cannot do this. But I've seen when I was in Umrah and in Hajj, people have been sleeping for hours and hours. And then they wake up, they say, Allahu Akbar, and they start their salat. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And I'm thinking, you were just snoring, you were just, and they'll be doing their salat groggy. They'll forget what surah they were doing. And I've seen it because I've had people beside me doing that. For us, if we've slept, then we have to go and do wudu again. And we have to prepare ourselves. So even the steps we do to go to do the wudu is an awakening. So that when we come to the musalla, we are mentally prepared to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are mentally braced for a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, what we often forget, knowledge, when we're seeking knowledge, we're getting a very close step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are actually going into the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam says that to seek knowledge, Allahumma salli ala, to seek knowledge even in a garbage bin is better than something that makes you neglectful in a palace. To seek knowledge even in a garbage dump is better in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than to be neglectful even in a palace. And so what happens there is we're preparing ourselves to come before the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, I just give examples. They're not, of course, 100% accurate. But if you're going for a job interview, and oftentimes people will come here and they say, Sheikh, what dua should I recite? What amal should I do? What can I do to, inshallah, go in this in this interview with flying colors, and I want to come out of the interview with flying colors. I want to get this job. I really need this job. I have to do this. And, the first advice is, of course, I'll give them du'as. But I say, have you prepared yourself? How many times students come to the sheikh or the sayyid and they'll say, can you please pray for us? Make dua for us. Our exam is next week. Our exam is on Monday. My first question is, I'm not going to make a dua for you until you tell me how much have you studied. If I was going to study, why would I need your dua? This is sometimes the reaction. If I studied, why would I need to do it? And it doesn't work like that. It doesn't happen. You have to prepare yourself. So are you going to go to an interview? Are you going to go to your exam? You've studied all night. At 6 o'clock, you go to sleep, and at 7:30 is your exam. This is what we call suicidal. Unless you have Jot Cola or what are these energy drinks, and they keep you awake. They put a spurt in you for about 4 hours, and then God knows what they do after that. Allahu Alam. But is that what you want to do? Or do you want to at least prepare ahead of time? Get well rested, because psychologically speaking, and educators will tell you this, that if you want to have an effective impact, if you're going for an important job, make sure you are well rested. Make sure you're mentally prepared. If you're going for something, if you're going for an interview, it was interesting because I had somebody call me after an interview. They said, I blew something, I blew it. I said, what happened? I should have done some research as to what the company was about before I went for the interview. I said, because they will talk about their ideology, their vision statement, their mission statement, what they're all about. And I said, wow, this is something that Islam already told us 1400 years ago. You're coming to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you know the meaning of Surah Fatiha? When you raise your hand and you say, Rabbana Atina, do you know what you are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for? And people say that I cannot concentrate in my namaz. What should we do? One of the best things to do is to understand and to try and realize the potential of what we are saying. And then you tell me that you cannot concentrate in salah. It won't work, because you will concentrate in salat when you know what you're saying. Prepare yourself. I'm about to do Surah Fatiha. Fatiha, the opening. I'm about to do a surah. I'm about to say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la wa bihamdihi. Subhana Rabbiyal Azim wa bihamdihi. Sami Allahu liman hamida. Allah listens to the one who praises him. Allah is not going to ignore anybody. When you say Sami Allahu liman hamida with the meaning and the thought that Allah will listen, then the yaqeen, the certainty and the faith gets reinforced. And that is what it means to prepare ourselves when we're coming for knowledge, when we're preparing to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our preparatory job. And so even when we go for a lecture or learning, at least mentally be prepared to absorb the knowledge. Of course, this is just the beginning of this discussion, and we'll talk at our discussions, forthcoming discussions. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shaniyaka huwa al-abtar. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين خالق السماوات والأرض إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين طه وياسين بالقاسم محمد. وصل على وسير رسول رب العالمين وأمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين وقاتل الكافرين والمشركين مولانا علي بن أبي طالب. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. وصل على بنت رسول رب العالمين سيدة نساء العالمين صديقة الطاهرة أم الأئمة فاطمة الزهراء. وسلم على سبط نبي الرحمة وسيدي شباب أهل الجنة إمام الحسن والحسين. والأئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين سيد العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباكر للم النبيين وجعفر بن محمد الصادق البار الأمين وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا المرتضى اللهم صل ومحمد بن علي التقي الجواد وعلي بن محمد النقي الحادي والحسن بن علي الزكي العسكري والإمام القائم الحادي المهدي المنتظر. اللهم عجل فرجه وقرب زمانه وكثر انصاره واهلك اعداءه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنوا أرضك توعا وتمتع فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتبارك في كتابه الحكيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. Once again I remind myself and the believers to observe the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A number of issues have caught the world this week. Of course the main one is the continuous shelling in Syria, the difficulties that the people, the civilians especially, the children are encountering there. And I was comparing that to last week when the flooding in this area was taking place in Kitchener-Waterloo, Brantford and southern parts of Cambridge. I was looking at the number of news reports about the young boy. Of course, our hearts go out to him, 3-year-old who was drawn away and not yet, so far as last night, they had not found the body yet. Of course, they were looking for a body, now not even expecting him to be alive. And there was a report, there was actually a request, a demand from the citizens to have an inquiry as to why this flooding happened, why a 3-year-old had to die, why a 3-year-old had to basically drown, whatever the case may be. And I was thinking, I said, mashallah, there's so much emphasis for one 3-year-old. Imagine in the Middle East and in Africa, how many 3-year-olds are dying through preventable ways. They're talking about this flood being preventable. All I wanted to share, there was a 3-year-old girl's report that I read in Syria. And just before she was killed, before she died, the last words that one of the journalists quoted from her was, "I'm going to tell God what they have done to me. I'm going to tell Allah what I've gone through." And I think that this is a very profound statement for all of us here to be at least remembering and aware of, that ultimately we do have to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's us in our capacity here, whether it's a world leader, whether it's a nation, whether it's a military person, or whether it's one of the perpetrators of any of these crimes, one day there will be account, and the voices of those little 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 10-year-olds and everybody in between will not go unheard. This is our yaqeen and our certainty, that in the Western world we see the value of life is so deep that inquiries will be held for one person disappearing or being killed, or a body found, or a preventable flood that happened. And yet nobody's talking about an inquiry for Palestine, for Yemen, with basic needs of an antibiotic. Thousands of children have died. Parents just like you and me, siblings just like you and me, losing their near and dear ones. The least we can do is shed a tear and make our voice heard loud and clear. We have an obligation. Sometimes people often say, what can we do? Our voices, our emails, our phone calls will make a difference. And even if they don't make a difference, at least we can feel comfortable knowing that we fulfill a small part of our obligation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and insaniyat. Our obligation to Allah is incomplete without remembering our obligation to insan. We have an obligation to each other. I cannot say that I'm worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all day and all night and still be rude, mean, or hurtful to you or anybody else. And so this is something that needs to be very seriously addressed. Another shooting this morning in Michigan, again, details are not out, has led for more calls for gun control. But let's be practical about one thing. Even if we have gun control, if everybody already has a gun anyways, gun control might prevent future people from having guns. Those who already have it. The issue is not gun control. The issue is to realize and educate the public and the population as to what are our obligations to each other based on insaniyat. Doesn't matter whether one is religious or irreligious. Doesn't matter whether one believes in God or doesn't believe in God. We all have to care for each other. We all have an obligation and responsibility to each other. After the Florida shootings, the people were saying, we want to have this and that, and the laws have to be strengthened and tightened, and we want to have more laws for those who are mentally ill, for them not to be able to get weapons. You will have sane people shooting and killing, as many as insane people doing that. Perhaps the other way is more. The issue is not controlling. The issue is educating. And if there is an education and a genuine desire in the hearts of the people to understand and to care for one another, and to realize that one day we will have to answer for our actions and our deeds, perhaps then and only then will the mindset in the United States change, and other countries as well. It seems that the percentage and the ratio is much higher in the US, and the guns are much more easily available and readily available, because the Constitution of the US says you have the right, an American has the right to bear arms. That's a constitutional allowance. And so, what is the right to bear arms? You see, there's a vicious cycle, and I'm going to leave you with this thought, because as I said, I have to be quite weary of the time. The right to bear arms was because of self-defense. You have the right to bear arms because you have to defend yourself. Defend yourself against whom or what? Against the other person who might attack you. But why did he have an arm? Why did he have a gun in the first place? Because he also has the right to defend himself. And so, so basically, you've got a vicious circle and a cycle here that is something that is basically non-stoppable at the moment, as far as I can see. That everybody wants to defend themselves, but somebody along the way is going to be an aggressor. If everybody only used weapons to defend themselves, you wouldn't have the atrocities and the chaos that you have now. And many of these guns are used against domestic partners, siblings, children, and parents. If you see the statistics, and like I said, I will leave you at that. Some homework that you have to do, I have to give you after Jummah. You will be shocked to know how many of those guns are used against family members as opposed to an outsider. The figures were shocking when I read them. And even one is too much. You can see it for yourself. So this is something that needs to be really deeply looked at. And if we have any family or friends in the US, they will be able to talk to their congressmen, their House of Representatives people, and hopefully even their president, who was a very, very strong supporter of guns, and the NRA, the National Rifle Association. But I'll tell you the impact of your voices, or the voices of people. One of the companies who was a supplier, or who was doing business with the NRA, the National Rifle Association, when they got only 50,000 signatures on a petition, they actually terminated their relationship with the NRA. This is something that we can actually learn from. US is 10 times bigger than us. For us, that means 5,000 signatures can make a difference in a business environment, in a capitalistic situation. And that's why I always tell you, I've repeatedly mentioned, your voices are important. Don't think that just one voice or one word will not make a difference. Inshallah, it will. And if all of us take out that responsibility, we can strive for at least a little bit of a better world in the environment that we live in, inshallah. And then we ask Allah to help us for the rest of the way, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد